Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back to a peaceful patch of French countryside on a sunny summer day in 1807, where Napoleon Bonaparte, yes, that Napoleon, is standing in a tailored military coat, being mobbed by several hundred rabbits. Not metaphorical ones, real, fluffy, aggressively cuddly rabbits. You're gonna watch one of the most feared generals in world history get nibbled into submission by his own picnic plans. It's warm, the grass is soft underfoot. You can smell the wine being uncorked. You're surrounded by high-ranking generals, silver platters of cheese, and a confused footman holding a cage full of twitching noses. This is not a joke. This is history. Or at least, history as it occasionally naps with one eye open and dreams up something truly surreal. You probably won't survive this if you're expecting a serious military campaign, but if you've ever wanted to watch an emperor dramatically flee from herbivores the size of baguettes, this might just be your moment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when we're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a gentle hill, the sun behind your back and the scent of wildflowers hanging in the lazy afternoon air. It's July, and the Treaty of Tilsit has just been signed. Napoleon is in good spirits for once. He's finally taken a break from redrawing Europe with a quill and cannonballs. And what better way to celebrate peace between France and Russia than with a picnic and a rabbit hunt? You weren't really given a choice. You're part of Napoleon's personal retinue for the day, which mostly means nodding respectfully and not tripping over your own boots. The estate belongs to one of Napoleon's trusted men, Alexandre Berthier, Marshal of the Empire, logistics genius, and unfortunately, not a zoologist. The field is perfectly manicured. Berthier, ever the planner, has organized a hunting party to entertain the emperor. Something low stakes, elegant, harmless. Just Napoleon, a few generals, some flintlock pistols, and a whole lot of unsuspecting rabbits. There's an awkward moment as everyone pretends they've been on dozens of rabbit hunts before. Napoleon naturally insists he has, though his coat looks better suited to ballroom warfare than bounding through grass. Still, the wine is flowing, the sun is shining, and a table nearby is heaving under the weight of jam tarts and veal pâté. As you sip something fizzy and question how many rabbits it takes to be considered a hunt, a small cart rolls in from the stables. It's covered with a tarp. From beneath it, there's a soft, rustling sound. A few squeaks. One fluffy ear pokes out. Berthier beams with pride. He's thought of everything. You give him the kind of look reserved for people who say, "Don't worry, I Googled it." Historians still argue whether Napoleon had any real interest in the sport, or if this was purely Berthier's misguided attempt to impress. Some letters from the period suggest Napoleon had more passion for pastry than game hunting. But here we are, regardless, standing on a sunlit field with a crowd of heavily metalled men and one increasingly active crate. You inch closer, curious. You can see the rabbits now, dozens of them, packed together in clumps of twitchy fur. Their noses pulse like nervous accordions. Some chew absently on hay. Others stare directly at you with that oddly unblinking rabbit intensity that suggests either existential wisdom or panic. And then it begins. Berthier nods to a pair of servants who begin unlatching the cages. You expect the rabbits to scatter like featherless fireworks, bounding into the grass with wild, majestic energy. You imagine Napoleon calmly picking one off with a pistol while delivering a monologue about empire. But no, the rabbits do not run. Instead, they hop out casually. One stretches, another yawns, and then one of them, small, gray, and ambitious, begins to approach Napoleon's boots. At first, it's cute. One bunny, a little too bold. Awe. Then come 5 more, then 20. Then an entire wave of fuzzy rebellion, all heading straight for the emperor like a tide of fur. There's a pause, no one moves, and then it hits you. These rabbits aren't wild. They aren't afraid. They're domestic, fed by hand, raised in cages. And when they see a man standing still in a fancy coat, they do what they've been trained to do. They assume he brought snacks. Napoleon is surrounded. Dozens, maybe hundreds of rabbits are now bounding across the grass in search of lunch. The emperor is backing up, startled. A general drops his pistol in confusion. Someone yells, "Shoo!" in a way that suggests they've never needed to shoo anything before. You take a step back and consider your options. You could help, or you could slowly reach for another tart. Berthier looks horrified. He hadn't bought wild hares. He'd sent his men to a local farm, who eagerly sold him the most docile, well-fed bunnies they had, never explaining they were pet stock, not game. One rabbit has now climbed onto Napoleon's boot. Another is chewing the fringe of his sash. A gentle breeze rolls across the field, carrying with it the scent of lilacs and mild panic. You breathe in deeply, watching as the man who once crossed the Alps on horseback is now fleeing toward his carriage, chased by an unstoppable cuddle mob. It is, by all accounts, the softest military defeat in European history. You're still standing there, half a jam tart in hand, as Napoleon disappears into his carriage in a blur of gold trim and furry panic. The door slams shut behind him. The bunnies, undaunted, thump softly against the wheels, some even hopping up on the steps, eyes glinting with the unshakable determination of creatures who suspect snacks are still inside. It's hard to describe the atmosphere. Imagine watching a world-class symphony abruptly replaced by a kazoo solo. The same generals who once mapped out battlefield flanks now flail around a garden trying to herd rabbits like they're late to a bunny-based conga line. You glance at Berthier, who is frozen mid-step, hands out like he's trying to bargain with the laws of nature. His wig is slightly askew. There's a rabbit nibbling his bootlace. And the picnic? Oh, it's ruined. The table is a mess of overturned cheese platters, paw prints in the butter, and one disturbingly composed rabbit sitting in the salad bowl like it owns the place. A few aides are running in zigzags, trying to grab the rabbits gently. This is still Napoleon's event, after all. No one wants to be known as the man who kicked the emperor's personal bunnies. So they shout things like, "Shoo!" and "No, monsieur, not the carrots," as the animals continue their adorable siege. By now, the scene is more rom-com than regimental. A light breeze carries the faint sound of squeaks and the unmistakable frustration of someone trying to regain dignity after being tackled by a creature that weighs less than a decent loaf of bread. You try not to laugh. It doesn't work. Now, the actual number of rabbits remains a point of historical contention. Some say a few hundred, others over 1,000. But whatever the number, it was enough to overwhelm a battalion of officers with pocket watches and very little rabbit experience. One officer attempts a pep talk. "They're just rabbits, for heaven's sake," as he backs away from a particularly persistent white one. Another mutters that if these were Prussian rabbits, they'd probably be better organized. You're not sure whether that's a compliment or a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Napoleon, watching from the small window of the carriage, is silent. He's not yelling, he's not even scowling, he's just confused. Somewhere between tactical embarrassment and digestive regret. There are theories. Of course there are theories. Some say Napoleon was mildly amused. Others say he was enraged. A few more colorful sources suggest he threatened to promote the rabbits to his personal guard if they kept demonstrating such aggressive loyalty. This is likely a joke, or a translation error, or, given the day, entirely plausible. Historians still argue whether this event happened exactly as told, or whether it's a myth magnified over time. But multiple memoirs from Napoleon's aides reference the incident. One even recalls that the rabbits seemed organized in ranks. That's a real quote from a real general, writing about real rabbits. And here's where it gets even more curious. The rabbits didn't attack everyone equally. They zoned in on Napoleon, almost exclusively. They bypassed junior officers, ignored the pastry table, and beelined straight for the emperor himself, like little fuzzy revolutionaries storming Versailles. Modern animal behaviorists who have somehow weighed in on this suggest that domestic rabbits imprint on humans as food sources. When a familiar figure appears, one dressed in an enormous shiny uniform perhaps, they assume it's snack o'clock, which might explain the charge. But still, you have to admit, it's an image. Napoleon Bonaparte, master of artillery, lord of logistics, emperor of half of Europe, defeated by creatures with no discernible necks. Eventually, someone has the brilliant idea to throw lettuce away from the crowd. It works. Sort of. A few of the rabbits chase after the flying greens like very soft missiles. Enough of a distraction for the others to be gently gathered, boxed back into the crates, and wheeled off, with a suspiciously high number of them still chewing. The picnic fizzles out after that. The generals try to save face. One declares the incident a successful test of reflexes. Another swears he saw a particularly fearsome buck. You overhear someone claiming the rabbits were drugged by enemy agents. You silently award that theory 0 points. Berthier attempts to apologize, but Napoleon waves it off, or possibly just waves at an imaginary fly. It's hard to tell. He orders the carriage to return early and says nothing about the incident during the entire trip back to camp. Not a word. A man who's written volumes of letters about cannon placement suddenly has no opinion on rabbits. That, more than anything, tells you how deeply weirded out he is. You sit beside a sleepy aide-de-camp and watch the countryside roll past the window. The wind shifts through the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, you're certain you hear a faint squeak, either memory or metaphor. In the following days, no one officially speaks of the incident. Not in reports, not in briefings, not even over morning coffee. But you catch looks, quiet grins. One general starts twitching his nose dramatically whenever Berthier enters the room. It becomes a thing. It's all unspoken, until it isn't. Because no matter how carefully you try to hide something like this, news travels, especially when that news involves a man in a bicorn hat trying to fend off a cloud of adorable food-seeking mammals. And you just happen to be there. Front row to the fluffiest footnote in military history. You wake the next morning in your military issue cot, still half dreaming of fur and fleeing emperors. There's a rabbit-shaped dent in your thoughts and the vague scent of grass and jam clinging to your uniform. You rub your eyes, sit up, and stretch, fully expecting the bunny episode to vanish into that corner of your brain reserved for fever dreams and awkward dinner toasts. But no. Because when you step outside, the first thing you hear is someone humming the Marseillaise in hiccupy little hop-hop rhythms. And there, lounging on a barrel, is Sergeant Fournier with a carrot in one hand and a twinkle in his eye. "So," he says casually, "heard we've upgraded from cavalry to cottontails." The jokes begin almost immediately. Not the loud, boisterous kind you'd get after a battle. These are whispered jabs, sly innuendos tucked inside logistics reports. One lieutenant writes that he needs more hair traps for camp security. Another updates a troop readiness document with the phrase, "all quiet, except for the occasional lagomorph insurgent." And yet, officially, nothing. Not a single mention in the bulletins, no entry in the Emperor's itinerary. If you didn't know better, you'd think the Bunny Brigade never happened. But you do know better, and so do the others. Whispers grow. Word spreads like melted brie. From campfires to candlelit strategy rooms, the story bounces, slightly more embellished each time. By day 2, the rabbits are said to have stormed the carriage in formation. By day 3, someone insists one bunny bit straight through Napoleon's ceremonial glove. It didn't, but the image is irresistible. You can't help it. You start cataloging the claims, mentally grading each version on plausibility, creativity, and fluff factor. There's talk of a commander rabbit with a ribbon around its ear. Another tale has them spelling out "Vive la République" in lettuce scraps. Unlikely, but 10 points for thematic flair. Historians still argue whether the silence around the incident was a coordinated cover-up or just collective embarrassment. Napoleon was known to be image conscious. He didn't like being mocked, certainly not by livestock. But here's a fun fringe theory. Some believe Napoleon allowed the story to circulate, very quietly, as a kind of bizarre psychological warfare. Think about it. You're a Prussian officer. You hear whispers that the French emperor was attacked by a pack of rabbits and lived to tell the tale. Do you mock it? Or do you wonder, what else does this man consider acceptable strategy? Food for thought. Or at least for the rabbits. Still, as days turn into weeks, the incident fades from immediate memory, slowly absorbed into the stew of army life. Marching, maps, meals, more maps, occasional cannon fire. You almost forget the bunnies, until one evening a courier hands you a sealed message marked top priority. You unroll it. It's a formal memo written in Berthier's handwriting addressed to the Imperial kitchen staff, requesting in extremely specific terms that all future live menu specimens be kept distinct from ceremonial guests. You snort, quietly, fold it up, and tuck it into your journal. Later that night, you find yourself at a small campfire with a few officers, passing around canteens in fatigue. One of them leans in and murmurs, "Did you hear? Someone's painting bunny silhouettes on their musket stock now. One per confirmed nibble." You think about how history remembers battles, about medals, monuments, stirring speeches. Then you think about a rabbit sitting triumphantly in a butter dish, and you wonder if that's closer to the truth than anyone's willing to admit. The next morning, you receive orders to move with Napoleon's mobile court. Another campaign is underway. Somewhere in Bohemia or Belgium, you lose track. But as you pack your things, you notice one of your fellow aides discreetly tucking a small, stuffed rabbit into his bag. A memento. You nod. You do the same. The road to Bohemia is long, dusty, and, thankfully, rabbit-free. For a while. You travel in carriages, wagons, on foot, sometimes by boat. The usual military shuffle, there's the occasional bandit scare, a rainstorm or two, and the endless shuffling of horses that smell like damp upholstery. Still, you find yourself lulled into a rhythm, one that lets your mind wander. And it wanders, right back to the rabbits. They come back to you in odd moments. A cluster of clouds that looks like a floppy ear. A misplaced glove that reminds you of a paw. You spot a cabbage cart in a village and nearly flinch. It's not just you. Rabbit references keep popping up in the smallest places. An infantryman draws whiskers on a cannonball. A junior officer you barely know whistles something suspiciously close to "Run, Rabbit, Run," which, to be fair, won't be written for another century. And then there's the painting. One afternoon, while camped near a sleepy Bohemian town, you're invited to an officer's tent. He says he's captured a moment of recent military history. You expect a landscape, maybe a heroic sketch of Napoleon on horseback. What you find is a small oil painting, bad lighting, worse proportions, of Napoleon standing atop a picnic table, saber drawn, surrounded by an army of rabbits. One's climbing his boot. Another appears to be giving tactical advice. You burst out laughing, nearly choke on your canteen water, and demand to know who painted it. He shrugs. A Polish grenadier. Claims he was there. The painting circulates for a few days before someone burns it, but not before copies are made. One ends up tacked to the back of a latrine door. Another, more refined version, ends up in a Parisian salon years later under the title La Terreur Lapine. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the true birth of the Napoleon rabbit myth. Some think it was already bubbling, whispered and half joked about. Others argue it took artistic interpretation, bad art in this case, to cement the absurdity into memory. You don't argue. You were there. And while the painting is wildly inaccurate, Napoleon never had glowing red eyes, to your knowledge, it captures something truer than truth, the sheer ridiculous glory of the moment. And somehow, that moment starts to shape something bigger. Because here's the thing about military life. It's repetitive. Days blur together. March, camp, drill. Every once in a while you need a story. Something that doesn't involve bayonets or blisters. Something weird. Something fuzzy. So the rabbit tail becomes a kind of code. You notice officers now referring to bad plans as harebrained. New recruits are warned to never turn your back on a carrot. One engineer draws a set of rabbit ears on the siege diagrams for fun. No one corrects him. And then there's the poetry. Yes, someone writes a ballad, entitled The Charge of the Fluffy Guard. It contains immortal lines such as, "They came without warning, with twitch and with squeak, their conquest not bloody, but buttered and chic." You memorize every stanza. One night you're sitting around a low fire, moonlight washing over the tents like a sleepy veil, and someone recites it aloud. The flames flicker, the verses swirl. You all laugh softly, very softly. This is still Napoleon's army, after all. But you can't help feeling that this shared joke, this gentle absurdity, brings a strange kind of comfort. A reminder that even in the middle of military campaigns, even while empires shuffle borders like playing cards, there's room for the surreal, for the unexpected, for rabbits. You begin to wonder what other great moments of history started with something small, something silly. A misplaced sandwich, a sneeze, a bunny in a berry tart. Of course, the campaign in Bohemia proceeds as planned. There are skirmishes, negotiations, cold nights, mud, always mud. But something's different now. There's a looseness among the men, a subtle levity, like a shared secret that makes everything just a bit more bearable. That, and someone's taken to carving tiny rabbits into the wooden stocks of their rifles. At first, it's just decorative. But by the end of the month, it's almost a badge of honor. And in the evenings, when the camp is quiet and the soup has been ladled out, you find yourself doodling in the margins of your campaign maps. Tiny ears, whiskers, occasionally a saber. You're not alone. You wake one morning to the familiar clang of pots and the sharp bark of orders. Another day, another strategic repositioning, another chance to forget which province you're in. You wipe the sleep from your eyes and yawn. The tent canvas flutters gently in the wind like a lazy salute. Then comes the sound. Thump, thump, pause. Hop, you freeze. Not again. But no, this time it's just a soldier named Leclerc dropping a sack of potatoes. You exhale. Still, your instincts are sharpening for rabbit-related chaos, and that paranoia seems oddly justified by what happens next. Because today, you receive a letter. Not an ordinary one. This one's from General Alexandre Berthier himself. It's sealed, official, and smells faintly of tobacco and stress. You break it open and scan the contents, and there it is, buried between lines about troop movements and supply inventories. Also, His Majesty requests a full incident report regarding the lagomorphic disruption during the July demonstration. That's the term they're using now, lagomorphic disruption. You sigh. Only Napoleon's court could take a bunny buffet ambush and dress it in Latin. You spend the next 2 hours hunched over a desk, writing what is perhaps the most delicate document of your career. How do you diplomatically explain to the emperor that his hunting party turned into a woodland coup? You try to soften it. The rabbits demonstrated unexpected agility and unity of purpose. A misalignment in game procurement logistics led to proximity issues. The emperor's strategic withdrawal was executed with commendable poise. You consider signing it, yours in fluff and chaos, but resist. Historians still debate whether that report made it to Napoleon's private papers. Some say it was burned. Others claim it ended up filed under miscellaneous game incidents. One bold researcher swears it was edited by Napoleon himself, with the word flee replaced by reposition. Regardless, the letter ignites something curious. A brief, strange period where lagomorphs become a legitimate strategic concern. Yes, really. You begin seeing memos from field officers requesting rabbit countermeasures. One wants to train falcons. Another proposes creating decoy food baskets distraction zones. Someone even suggests deploying cavalry with vegetable-scented boots to lure the enemy away. It's entirely ridiculous, and yet the proposals keep coming. Why? Because soldiers are bored, and bored soldiers invent things. Sometimes bayonets, sometimes bunny tactics. You witness a drill where someone screams, "Rabbit incoming!" and the entire squad drops, rolls, and shields their lunch. It's hard to tell if it's satire or a serious maneuver. Maybe both. You don't ask. Then one day you stumble across a pamphlet, poorly printed, slightly smudged, probably illegal. It's titled The Lapin Doctrine, Revolutionary Theory for Asymmetric Fluff Fare. Inside are diagrams, footnotes, even proposed ranks. You skim through it, amused. Commander Cottontail, Sergeant Fluffington, elite borough brigades. There's a crude drawing of a rabbit launching itself from a catapult. You can't help but admire the dedication. By now, the phenomenon is reaching Paris. You hear word from couriers that satirical newsletters in the capital are referring to Napoleon as Le Roi des Lapins. Some even start adding ears to his silhouette on broadsheets. The government, understandably, does not approve. One publisher is fined for including a recipe titled Imperial Rabbit Stew, Best Served Cold. You clip it anyway. The seasoning sounds decent. But among the ranks, the legend continues to flourish. A new rumor emerges that the rabbits were in fact spies, planted by the British or the Prussians, or, in one wildly speculative theory, time-traveling Austrian saboteurs in fuzzy disguise. You try not to laugh, you fail. But as silly as it all is, something deeper is happening. In the midst of campaigns, exhaustion, and the shadow of battles still to come, this little rabbit incident becomes a release valve, a whispered joke that doesn't cost anyone their dignity, a shared absurdity that levels rank and rankles no nation. You start to see it for what it is, morale. One afternoon, while helping translate a logistics document, you notice a footnote has been edited. Instead of 500 sacks of oats, it now reads 499 sacks of oats, one to appease the Rabbit King. The officer doesn't even flinch when you point it out. You grin, because here, amid muskets and maps, uniforms and uncertainty, someone's making room for whimsy. And that, oddly enough, might just be history worth remembering. The Bohemian landscape rolls by in hills and forests, the kind of quiet, misty terrain that makes you feel like you're walking through a watercolor. You've been reassigned to a staff unit now. Less mud, more parchment, and the rabbit jokes, you think, are finally starting to die down. You're wrong. It starts with the badges. At first, you think they're just decorative. Little cloth patches some junior officers are sewing onto the insides of their jackets. White thread, a simple silhouette, 2 ears, 1 twitchy nose, barely noticeable. But then you see one stitched boldly onto the outside of a forage cap, another on a cavalryman's saddlebag, and suddenly it's a movement. They call themselves the Order of the Hare. You blink. You ask someone if it's a joke. Oh no, they say, dead serious. It's an honor. Apparently, the order has ranks, initiation rituals, a loosely enforced code involving carrots and silence during thunderstorms. One man claims they hold midnight meetings to share dreams involving bunnies and battlefield strategy. Historians still argue whether the Order of the Hare was a genuine semi-secret society or just a glorified dare club. But in the moment, it feels very real and very contagious. Because soon, new recruits are arriving and asking if they're hare-worthy. A drummer boy insists his snares are rabbit-calibrated. Someone starts referring to sudden retreats as strategic burrowings. Even you get drawn in. It happens during a supply audit, of all things. You spot a tiny rabbit doodle next to the flower inventory, and you can't help it. You draw a second one beside it. Before you know it, the ledger has its own subplot in the margins. 2 rabbits falling in love amid sacks of barley. You don't even remember doing it. That's how deep it's sunk in. The commanders are baffled. They try to clamp down, issue official statements. The military will not tolerate insubordination, frivolous embroidery, or references to unauthorized lagomorphic organizations, which is the best possible way to guarantee everyone doubles down. Someone paints a massive rabbit on the side of a supply wagon. You see a cannon labeled the Hopper. A gunner trains a pigeon to coo whenever someone says carrot. It is complete chaos, gentle, silly, morale-boosting chaos. And then comes the ball. Yes, a ball, a formal dance, hosted by an eccentric logistics officer who believes in improving esprit de corps through waltzing. You attend, you're bored, then you notice something. All across the ballroom, on lapels, on hairpins, on shoe buckles are rabbits. Tiny ones, velvet ones, embroidered, painted, sculpted. Someone has even brought a live one, calmly nestled in the folds of a duchess's cloak. You blink. Again. At midnight, as per military tradition, the officer in charge toasts Napoleon. Then someone toasts our fluffy lord of tactical mayhem. A few people giggle. The Duchess curtsies with surprising solemnity. You realize you are no longer in control of this narrative. The rabbit story has taken on a life of its own. It's in the letters home, the lullabies, the side commentary and tactical meetings. One aide-de-camp casually compares the Russian winter to an Arctic hare, cold, sudden, and likely to ruin your boots. Even Napoleon, you hear, has stopped punishing people for mentioning it. That's as close as he'll ever come to an endorsement. And of course, artists are now obsessed. One evening, you're shown a charcoal sketch from a war painter posted near Prague. It's beautiful, delicate, eerie. It shows the emperor, realistically rendered, standing on a windswept hill, his coat billowing. In front of him is a single rabbit. They are locked in mutual recognition. Equals, perhaps. Strategists, foes. You're moved, slightly disturbed, but moved. There's something poetic about the way the myth keeps twisting. What began as a runaway picnic story has now become metaphor, morale, mystery. It's not just about rabbits anymore. It's about unpredictability, about the absurdity nestled deep in even the most rigid hierarchies, about how sometimes, when history gets too heavy, you need a story that lets it float. You keep thinking of that phrase, la terreur lapine, and you begin to suspect that the real terror isn't the rabbits. It's what they represent. The one thing even Napoleon can't control, whimsy. The snows begin early that year. You wake to frost on your boots, your breath curling out like ghostly ribbons. The tent walls creak with wind, and the usual morning bugle sounds like it's being played underwater. Winter has arrived, and it has zero interest in your rabbit escapades. Except, surprisingly, it does, because now the story evolves again. a new strain of myth emerges, whispered over campfires and between sips of overwatered wine, that the rabbits are winter spirits. No longer just fluffy rebels, they've become omens. Some claim the rabbits are Napoleon's punishment for past arrogance. Others say they're guardians, appearing only to those who will survive the next campaign. One grizzled veteran insists he saw a line of them staring silently at the eastern sky the night before Austerlitz. That same man believes his good fortune was due to slipping a radish into his sock. You don't even blink anymore. Historians still argue whether this phase, what's now called the Lapine superstition, was military-wide or mostly confined to bored regiments in bad weather. But to you, it's obvious. People will believe anything if it helps them cope with frostbite and looming war. The latest variation? Rabbit footprints in the snow are lucky. 3 in a row, extremely lucky. 4 means someone stole stew from the officer's mess. 5? Don't ask. The rules shift nightly. One morning, a cook refuses to serve porridge because he saw a hare dart across the parade ground. Bad oats day, he mutters solemnly, arms folded. You try to argue, but honestly, you're not that committed to porridge anyway. More interestingly, the superstition seems to be affecting strategy. You overhear a field marshal muttering, "I don't trust that ridge. No rabbit tracks." You squint. Is that a new metric for terrain analysis? He shrugs. Worked last week. At this point, nothing surprises you. To your quiet amusement, even the most cynical officers start keeping rabbit journals. Not officially, of course. That would be absurd. But you catch glimpses, pocket notebooks with sketches of floppy ears or poems like, "Hop, hop goes fate, past the frost-lined cannon gate. Will I live or will I fall? Ask the one with fur so small." It's a strange form of comfort. In a world dominated by strategy, maps, and cold efficiency, these odd little rituals provide some warmth, like mittens for the soul. Then comes the wooden idol. You find it in a village outside Brno, carved from oak and tucked into a broken windowsill. A rabbit, upright, hands pressed together in some kind of awkward, vaguely pious gesture. You laugh? Then stop, because surrounding it are coins, tiny scraps of food, a ribbon. Someone's been making offerings. You glance around the ruined room. It's empty, abandoned, but something about the setup feels intentional. The soldiers begin calling it the Blessed Bun. They give it a hat, a cloak. By dusk, a full altar has formed around it. Someone even recites a hymn, half Latin, half nonsense, ending with, "May our enemies flee like startled fluff." You'd roll your eyes, but your boots are warm for once, and the fire smells like cinnamon, so you let it happen. Napoleon, naturally, does not attend the ceremony, but you hear from a trusted source that someone tried to brief him on it. He blinked twice, nodded, and said, "At least they're not drunk." You honestly can't argue with that. The next few days are strange in that calm before the storm kind of way. Everyone's waiting. For what? No one's quite sure. And then you spot it, at the edge of the woods, a single rabbit. It doesn't run, just watches. You stare back. It's ridiculous. You know that. It's just an animal, but somehow you feel acknowledged. As if the universe is saying, "Yes, I know, this whole thing has been absurd, but it's also been yours." The rabbit hops once, disappears. You feel oddly like saluting. The campaign resumes. Snow gives way to sludge and sludge to dust, and soon you're marching again eastward toward Russia. The chill never fully leaves, but now it's mixed with something sharper. Anticipation, dread, maybe even a sense of inevitability. And the rabbits? They follow. Not literally, of course. You don't spot them bounding along beside the artillery wagons, but they remain, like echoes in the boots of tired soldiers, embroidered onto cuffs, scrawled on the corners of orders, mentioned in low voices before battle. You're riding beside an officer when he says, almost casually, "You know, I dreamt of the Emperor's tent filled with rabbits last night." You nod, because at this point, that's just a Tuesday. He adds, "They were arguing tactics." You arch a brow, and they made some decent points. You both ride in silence for a moment. Then he chuckles. Historians will think we were mad. They probably will. Historians still debate whether the rabbit myth peaked during the lead-up to the Russian invasion, or if it simply dissolved into the cold, like everything else. What's clear is that it persisted long past what any reasonable person would call the joke phase. Because now, people take it seriously. You hear of entire platoons who refuse to move without their assigned bunny watch. A post goes up at the edge of a trench, not for guarding against cavalry, but for scanning the horizon for twitchy ears. If a hare appears before dawn, good luck. If one crosses your path midday, bad luck. If it sneezes, you're doomed, though no one can confirm that rabbits even sneeze. There are murmurs of a man who carved a rabbit from snow each morning and refused to fight until it melted. There's even a rumor, surely nonsense, that one general began issuing secret battle orders encoded in bunny drawings. Historians have found no evidence of this, but they have found a surprising number of sketches involving top hats and monocles in the Imperial archives. You can't help wondering. Even the official army bulletin, La Gazette Militaire, starts including little lapine reports. A casual joke, maybe, but one entry stands out. Today in the 12th Regiment, a rabbit sat in the center of the breakfast fire and refused to leave. The men gave it a biscuit. Morale up. No casualties. You read it 3 times, because that's where things get weird. The rabbits start showing up more. During bivouacs, in mess lines, one is seen hopping across the roof of a field hospital. Another allegedly rides briefly atop a pack mule before hopping off dramatically. You consider these mere anecdotes, hallucinations born of bad rations and long marches, until one afternoon, near Smolensk, you spot something unusual. 3 rabbits, sitting side by side, perfectly still, not hiding, not running, just watching. You call out, a few soldiers join you. You all stare, then someone whispers, "We're being scouted." The others nod, solemn. You turn. They're rabbits. "Exactly," says a sergeant, "the most cunning spies." You open your mouth to argue, then close it. There's no point anymore. This isn't about biology, it's about belief. And belief, you realize, is a survival strategy. That night, under a violet sky and the kind of stars that feel sharpened by frost, you share a fire with 3 men you barely know. One is humming a song. The tune is old, but the lyrics have changed. March we forth on cottoned feet, to fields where snow and silence meet, with floppy ears and daring grace, we find the enemy's hiding place. You're about to laugh, but then you notice the man is crying, softly, silently, and it clicks. The rabbit story is no longer funny. It's no longer strange, it's armor. Because the truth is, many of these men won't make it home. They know that, you know that. So they carry something lighter, something ridiculous, something soft in a world of steel and blood. A tale of rabbits. Napoleon doesn't acknowledge it publicly, but someone swears they saw a tiny wooden bunny on his personal desk, tucked beside his maps. No one dares ask. You wake to fire, not literal flames, though you wouldn't be shocked by that at this point, but the fire of motion, urgency, someone yelling in Polish, a horse kicking over a lantern. The camp is on the move before sunrise, and you, bleary-eyed and half-buttoned, stumble out into a sea of disoriented uniforms and muddy boots. The Russians have moved, or not. Or maybe they haven't moved but are thinking about moving. It's the kind of campaign update that feels both vital and totally ambiguous. In other words, it's Tuesday again. As you pack your satchel, you notice it. A rabbit, perched, bold as a brass button, on top of a crate of salted meat. It blinks at you, then urinates. You sigh. This is considered, by now, a fairly auspicious sign. A urine-blessed ration crate? You'll eat like kings. Someone sees it too. "He's back," a voice calls. "The general." They've named this one. Of course they have. He's General Lapin. Apparently he's been sighted at 4 different encampments and always right before a skirmish. Historians still argue whether General Lapin was a single exceptionally bold rabbit, or whether every plump bunny became General Lapin in moments of stress-induced mass delusion. The sketches, though, are eerily consistent. Slightly overweight, 1 torn ear, a small notch in the tail. You give him a biscuit. He accepts it gravely and hops away with all the gravity of a minor nobleman retreating from an awkward duel. As the day wears on, talk of the rabbit spreads through the ranks like wildfire, or at least like lukewarm broth. One lieutenant claims the general winked at him. A drummer insists the rabbit chewed his bootstrap in the pattern of Napoleon's initials. "I'm telling you," he says, "it's prophecy." You stare at him. "Your boot says NB." He nods, "And I don't even own boots with initials." You don't push further, because something is happening here beneath the jokes and the dirt. The men are building a symbol, not of power or victory, but of refusal, of absurdity. They're daring the horror of war to stay serious in the face of a rabbit chewing on cannon wheels. One colonel, the stern kind, with a scar and a mustache so sharp it could cut cheese, delivers orders while petting a rabbit in his lap. He doesn't break eye contact. You obey those orders extra quickly. And then comes the banner. You spot it first at a minor outpost, a scrap of canvas nailed to a bent lance bearing a crude but recognizable image, a rabbit, wearing Napoleon's bicorn hat. The words beneath? Nous sautons, donc nous sommes. We hop, therefore we are. You stare at it. It stares back. It's ridiculous and brilliant. You hear it spreads within days. At least 3 companies adopt it as their unofficial mascot. One squad paints it on the side of a cart. Another bakes it into hardtack biscuits using a carved potato stamp. A few officers complain, but most let it be. The army is fraying. The cold is creeping back. Morale slips through the cracks like mist. If a rabbit banner helps hold the center, so be it. And you, ever the observer, ever the quiet note-taker, find yourself believing too. Because when the enemy charges and the smoke thickens and the flags dip in the chaos, what rises instead? That absurd rabbit on the pole, flapping madly in the wind. And suddenly, everyone fights a little harder, or maybe just a little funnier. One soldier yells, "For the bunny," as he charges. Another throws a turnip like a grenade. And somewhere in the middle of the madness, you swear. You hear someone humming the Lapin hymn. Floppy ears and sharpened paws, carrot blades and cotton claws. You never learn the rest, but it doesn't matter, because the battle ends. And General Lapin is seen again, perched on a shattered drum, surveying the field like a tiny emperor with fur. He does not blink. He does not flinch. He just is. You've seen many strange things during this campaign. A man who swears by soup made from boiled boots. An officer who shaved only one half of his face, claiming it kept him balanced. A priest who performed impromptu weddings between soldiers and their muskets, so they don't feel alone in the afterlife. But none of that compares to what you find at the next encampment. You arrive late, your horse exhausted, your boots caked in the kind of mud that sucks down dreams. The sun has sunk behind the horizon like it's hiding from responsibility. And there it is, a rabbit training school. You blink, you walk in circles, you blink again, but no, it's real, or real enough. A group of half-delirious soldiers have cordoned off a corner of the camp and created what they call École Militaire de Lapins, Military Academy for Rabbits. There are ranks: Sergeant Snuffles, Corporal Fluff, Lieutenant Whiskers. Each one wears a tiny stitched collar made from scraps of uniform. They're working on drills, or rather the men are doing drills while gently nudging the rabbits in vaguely similar directions. "About face," someone shouts. A rabbit sneezes and hops into a tin cup. "Excellent form," the sergeant murmurs. You ask cautiously what the objective is. A young private, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and probably turnip wine, tells you, "It's about readiness. You never know when the enemy might underestimate us due to our lagomorphic auxiliaries." You nod, as if this is a perfectly sane sentence. Historians still debate whether this school was a genuine attempt at rabbit domestication or just a morale-boosting delusion shared among weary men. Some dismiss it entirely. Others point out that multiple regimental reports make note of improved spirits after tactical rabbit seminars. One even includes a formal complaint from a general who tripped over a rabbit mid-inspection. "While I appreciate the ingenuity of field morale efforts," he writes, "I do not expect to be outmaneuvered by a creature the size of a wine bottle." Regardless of interpretation, the school gains popularity. By the next week, there's a drill schedule pinned to a tree. 600 carrot assembly, 700 bounding formation, 7:30 tactical ear pivoting, 900 meditation and fluff grooming. A note scrawled beneath it reads, "Visitors welcome, treats appreciated." You leave a piece of biscuit on the stump and move on. What strikes you isn't the absurdity, it's the care. These men, filthy and footsore, have created a world inside the war. A gentler, sillier, more survivable place where strategy includes stroking a rabbit and muttering, "Good lad, remember the flanks." It's a kind of resistance. Not against the enemy, but against despair. You watch as a man with 3 fingers left gently knits a tiny red cape for a rabbit he calls Marshal Burroward. Another reads aloud from a tattered copy of Plutarch, assigning different philosophical schools to his rabbits. "This one's a Stoic," he says, "very calm. That one's clearly Epicurean, loves radishes." They all laugh, soft, tired laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Later, you hear whispers of a rabbit recon corps. No one's sure what it does. There's no evidence it ever existed. But someone claims a small group once strapped notes to rabbits and let them loose behind enemy lines. They were intercepted, another adds, but not the notes. What happened to the notes? They ate them. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Whether or not any of this is true doesn't matter anymore. Because what's undeniable is this. In the middle of a grinding, brutal, bone-soakingly cold war, men are whispering bedtime stories about bunnies in battalions. And the fact that this has become normal, that's the miracle. That night, someone puts on a puppet show using sock bunnies and a campfire. There's a tiny Napoleon voice. There's a tiny Russian general voice. There's a duel with toothpicks. And you, curled up in your cloak with your feet numb and your heart oddly warm, fall asleep mid-puppet monologue. A sock says, "We charge at dawn." The other replies, "Not without snacks." You smile in your sleep. Dawn breaks on a battlefield turned warren. The frost clings to everything, silvering cannon barrels, helmet rims, and the whiskers of half-asleep sentries. Somewhere, a trumpet coughs out a half-hearted reveille. You stretch, wincing at the stiffness in your back, and hear the telltale crunch of hay beneath your bedroll. Except, you didn't sleep on hay. You sit up. A rabbit stares at you, just stares, like it owns the dawn. Then it hops away, entirely unimpressed by your presence, your rank, which is none, or your brewing existential crisis. You look around. You're not the only one waking up in the company of rabbits. They're everywhere. One soldier has 3 sleeping against his thigh. Another is spooning a rabbit like it's a teddy bear. One poor chap rolls over, gets a tail in the mouth, and gags so loudly that someone yells, "Bayonet drill!" It's not a drill, just breakfast. You watch as soldiers go about their morning routines with military precision and rabbit interference. A man trying to polish his boots is repeatedly thwarted by a rabbit stealing the cloth. Another, trying to fill a pipe, ends up sharing it with a particularly assertive gray fluff ball. The rabbits somehow are in control. There are theories. Some say the rabbits are spies. Others say they're reincarnated generals. One man, previously sober, now claims to be receiving battle plans through rabbit dreams. He stares at you over breakfast and whispers, "Tonight, we flank west." You nod and scoot your soup slightly farther away from him. What no one can deny, though, is this. The rabbits are organizing. There are patterns, formations, territory claims. A particularly regal black rabbit has taken up residence on the highest point of the supply wagon, surveying the camp like a 4-legged commander. They've chewed their way through saddle straps, eaten correspondence, and even once de-triggered a musket by hopping across it. You're not sure how, but it happened. Everyone saw. And yet, no one is angry. Because alongside the chaos, something unexpected has settled into the bones of the army. Calm. Historians still argue whether this phenomenon was mass hallucination, post-traumatic coping, or a true moment of interspecies harmony, born out of shared trench mud and mutual distrust of loud noises. But the result is measurable. Discipline improves, fights reduce, food sharing increases. One general actually notes in his daily report morale high, bunnies omnipresent, hygiene questionable. Still, this growing symbiosis doesn't come without complications. At the morning roll call, a quartermaster accidentally lists one Corporal Thistlewhisker as present, before realizing he's staring at a rabbit in a hat. No one corrects him. Another soldier insists that Private Nibbleton saved his life by tripping him into a ditch just as a musket ball flew past. "You doubt me," he says, "but that rabbit has seen things." You shrug. At this point, anything is possible. By midday, the rabbits are part of daily strategy sessions. Not officially, of course. But no one says anything when one hops onto a map and sits on a red X. The general stares at it. "Interesting choice," he murmurs. "We move east." You're fairly certain the rabbit was just warming its toes. But east you go. The army moves again, quieter now, oddly more synchronized, as though, by some strange osmosis, the men are mirroring the rabbits, hopping over puddles, snuggling for warmth, blinking slowly in silent judgment of others. You catch yourself chewing slower, pausing longer between words, twitching your nose thoughtfully. When you realize what you're doing, you panic. Too late. It's happening. Napoleon's army is going full rabbit. One lieutenant begins sketching blueprints for mobile rabbit armor. He claims it'll revolutionize warfare. His prototype consists of a sardine tin and a cork helmet. The rabbit immediately eats the helmet. Still, spirits remain high. At night, fires glow warm and low. Men hum lullabies their mothers once sang, now swapped for lyrics about Captain Cottontail and the Siege of Carrot Hill. One such song ends with the stirring refrain, "We dig, we dash, we burrow through, in fur and fluff we follow true." You pretend not to tear up. And you know, somewhere deep down in your officer's journal, or perhaps just the diary you pretend isn't real, that you'll write this down not as madness, but as miracle. Because somehow, among shattered roads and broken dreams, the rabbits have given the army something no emperor, no general, no victory ever could. Peace. Even if only for a night. You've seen a lot of strange things in war, but you've never seen an emperor chasing a rabbit. Not metaphorically, not in a dream, not in some fevered allegory whispered over bad stew. Literally. The sun is high, the fields golden and soft beneath your boots. You're not marching today. Today is for diplomacy. That is, the kind involving wine, food, and a carefully orchestrated spectacle. Napoleon's version of a corporate picnic, but with better outfits and worse table manners. You arrive late to the feast grounds, the scent of roast pheasant and overambition in the air. Tables are laden with fruits, cheeses, pastries, so delicate they collapse under their own self-importance. And in the center, cages. Hundreds of them. Inside, rabbits. Fluffy, docile, wide-eyed. You are told with the sort of enthusiasm normally reserved for winning lottery numbers that these are the centerpiece of the event. Napoleon has decided on a rabbit hunt. Historians still argue whether this was meant as a show of aristocratic leisure, a nod to Roman field games, or simply a way to unwind after conquering half of Europe and confusing the other half. Regardless, the plan is simple. Release the rabbits, then hunt them. In theory, a dignified pursuit. In practice, a soft-furred uprising. It begins innocently enough. The cages are opened. The first few rabbits hop out, blinking against the light. A trumpet sounds. Napoleon readies his weapon, flanked by marshals and ministers, their boots polished to tragic optimism. And then, chaos. The rabbits, instead of scattering, charge, not in fear, in curiosity, in hunger, in adorable vengeance. They don't run away from the hunters, they run toward them. Dozens at first, then hundreds. They swarm like an avalanche made of fluff and long ears. Men shriek, cloaks are flung aside. A minister drops his sword and hides behind a decorative hedge shaped like a lion. Napoleon yelps. That's not a thing he does often. You, standing at a safe distance with a half-eaten pear, watch as the Emperor of France backpedals, arms flailing, pursued by what one onlooker later describes as a most determined brigade of lagomorphs. You think, maybe they remember. Maybe these are the same rabbits, or descendants, or simply well-informed sympathizers. Either way, they are not interested in diplomacy. They want the cheese, and possibly vengeance. The rabbits chase Napoleon all the way back to his carriage, where he dives inside, slamming the door. Several rabbits leap after him and bounce off the sides like small, angry marshmallows. The scene is immortalized in exactly one soldier's sketchbook, a cartoon of Napoleon mid-sprint, surrounded by bunnies with the caption, "The Happening." It becomes a running joke among the troops. You hear it whispered in the trenches. You see that cloud? Looks like the bunny battalion. Or muttered when things go wrong. Well, could be worse. Could be emperor chased by rabbits worse. What's more baffling is that Napoleon, instead of punishing anyone, laughs about it. Not publicly, of course. In front of the men, he claims the rabbits were ill-managed, that the handlers did not understand the nature of true wild game. But in private, rumor says he keeps a tiny sketch pinned inside his campaign chest, a doodle of a rabbit in a bicorn hat. Historians still debate whether Napoleon feared the rabbits, admired them, or saw in them a reflection of his own underestimated strength. Small, unassuming, but unstoppable in numbers. You ponder that as you walk back toward camp. The event has left everyone slightly shaken, slightly humbled, and slightly more respectful of soft things. One man now ties a ribbon around his rabbit's neck every morning. Another starts writing poetry. Soft paws tread, where boots have bled. Not great poetry, but heartfelt. And for a while, just a while, the war feels far away, like a bad dream or a story you once overheard but didn't believe. Because when you look out across the field and see rabbits lounging in the grass, basking in the sun as if they own every inch of it, you start to believe maybe, just maybe, they do. And you think, if this war ever ends, I'll open an inn, a quiet place near a river, with rabbits, no battles, no boots, just burrows. By now, you've adjusted to the rabbits. You sleep next to them, share rations, take turns keeping watch. Though let's be honest, their version of watch mostly involves twitching ears and judging you from a patch of moonlight. Still, it's hard not to see them as comrades. But nothing lasts forever. And tonight, something feels off. The sky is a thick velvet, stars half swallowed by low clouds. You walk perimeter duty with your coat drawn tight, boots squelching in the damp. The rabbits, usually night owls in their own twitchy way, are quiet. Too quiet. You pass Sergeant Louvier polishing his bayonet and ask, "Seen the furballs?" He frowns. Vanished. All of them. You chuckle, but it dies quickly in your throat, because it's true. No rustling, no faint chewing, no mysterious pile of parsley gone missing. Just absence. You head toward the eastern slope, their favorite nest spot, and find only indentations in the grass. Dozens, as if they all rose at once and disappeared into the night. An eerie wind rises. You swear you hear a distant thump. Not boot steps, drums. The next morning, word spreads. The Austrians are advancing. Not in force yet, but scouts report movement. Heavy, organized, something's coming. In the command tent, maps are unrolled. Fingers trace lines. The generals argue quietly, as if not to wake something ancient sleeping just outside the canvas. You're ordered to prepare fallback trenches. By midday, morale sours. The bunnies are still gone, and with them, a strange kind of calm has left too. The soldiers grow twitchy, short-tempered. One man snaps at his shadow, another curses a tree for looking smug. You try to focus, dig, haul, dig, unter. A single rabbit appears, covered in mud, limps slightly, carries, absurdly, a ribbon in its mouth, the same one tied by Corporal Julot to his combat companion, a rabbit named Radish. The rabbit hops once, then collapses beside your boot. You kneel, stroke its fur, and you find, tied to the ribbon, a scrap of paper. Scrawled on it, just one word, run. Your breath catches. You show the generals. They scoff, say it's nonsense, a prank. But that night, the rabbits return, all of them, in formation, not running, marching, eyes alert, fur matted with dirt, some wear bits of armor, a thimble on a head here, a napkin tied like a cloak there. One carries a stick like a lance. No one laughs. Because they move like messengers. They gather at the center of camp, form a loose ring, and sit, silent. Watching. You and the other soldiers gather too, circling them like students before an oracle. Historians still argue whether what followed was mass hysteria, symbolic projection, or proof of the oldest and strangest bond between man and nature. But when that black rabbit, yes, the same one who once took command of the supply cart, hops forward and places a tiny pebble atop the map of enemy lines, no one dares ignore it. A quiet order is given. New trenches are dug, old ones abandoned. That night, the Austrians strike, but the attack hits empty lines, ghost camps lit only by fake fires and strategically placed cloaks on sticks. The real army? Hidden deep in the western woods, guided there by rabbit intuition, dumb luck, or divine rabbit prophecy. Pick your theory. Either way, it works. The ambush is avoided, lives are saved, and in the morning, rabbits are treated like royalty. Extra rations, straw palaces, one even gets a custom medal shaped like a carrot. You write in your journal, "They saved us. I don't know how or why, but they saved us." The war continues as wars do, but something's changed. You see rabbits differently now. Not pets, not pests, allies, even when they chew your shoelaces or leave droppings in your helmet. Especially then, because they remind you of something gentler, something stubborn, something brave, and something that, like you, just wants to survive. You wake up to birdsong and the distinct feeling that something ridiculous is about to happen. Again, the sun is soft gold over the horizon, painting the tents in sleepy warmth. Soldiers shuffle past with mugs of something almost entirely unlike coffee. A breeze rustles the makeshift laundry line where your one decent pair of socks tries and fails to dry. And the rabbits? Oh, the rabbits have upgraded. Overnight, they've built a network of tunnels. At least that's what Private Lemoyne swears as he falls into one mid-yawn. You help pull him out and confirm, yes, there's a whole burrow system now under Camp Despair. No one calls it Despair anymore. Now it's Lapinville. The rabbits run patrols. They dig lookouts. One even appears to have appointed itself guard at the latrine. A strange peace settles over the camp. The generals grumble, but even they admit, morale's never been higher. It's hard to stay gloomy when your grenadier helmet doubles as a rabbit daycare. You write another note home. We march soon. The rabbits are planning something, I don't know what, but they've started using our maps. And it's true. You catch the black rabbit. Yes, that one again, nudging the corner of the campaign map with its paw. It hops precisely to the edge of a marked forest trail, then thumps its foot 3 times. A message? A warning? A performance critique? Historians still argue whether the rabbits genuinely understood the battle plans, or if the soldiers simply projected meaning onto every twitch and hop out of equal parts desperation and fondness. Either way, the army listens. And then, just as quickly as they came, the rabbits begin to leave. Not all at once, not dramatically. They simply drift. Back to the fields, the hills, the hedges. 1 or 2 remain. Mascots, really. Companions. A couple soldiers swear there's talk in dreams. You nod politely and pretend not to notice their growing collection of tiny rabbit-sized capes. But the mass exodus is clear. Napoleon, when told, doesn't seem surprised. He simply nods and says, "Even the bravest allies know when the war must be ours alone." Or maybe he said, "They probably got bored." His accent was thick that morning. You can't quite tell. And so the army marches again, across hills and into valleys that look suspiciously like they were once rabbit-infested, toward whatever fate Napoleon's ambition has carved into the stone of Europe. But it's different now. There's a story carried with the pack mules and whispered in the chow lines, a tale of when the Emperor of France ran from rabbits, of how the smallest creatures turned the tide of a skirmish, of how, for one brief and bewildering moment, the war belonged not to men but to fluff. One soldier commissions a painting. It's dramatic, unrealistic, features a rabbit in full military regalia, paw raised, standing atop a cannon, ears billowing like flags. The inscription reads, "To our silent allies, may your burrows be deep and your lettuce fresh." It hangs in the mess tent, and somehow no one laughs. You think often of that summer, of the dust in your boots, of the soft pressure of a rabbit's weight in your lap as cannon fire echoed far off like distant weather. And sometimes just before sleep takes you, you remember that black rabbit, the one with the ribbon, and you wonder where it went. Back to a warren, a forest glade, or maybe deeper, to whatever secret council governs the strange magic of survival and small rebellions. One night, long after the war has ended, you sit by your cottage window, a rustle in the garden. You glance up, and there, lit by moonlight, is a single rabbit, not black, but somehow familiar. It meets your eyes, pauses, then turns and vanishes into the dark, leaving only paw prints in the dew. You sip your tea, smile faintly, and whisper, "Bon retour, mon général." The war is over. Years have passed, decades, maybe. You no longer measure time in campaigns or seasons, but in the slow rhythm of garden harvests and the way the sun hits your porch at different times of year. Still, memory is funny. You forget names, but never the sound of boots in mud, never the weight of a canteen, never the way rabbits sound when they're plotting, which they absolutely do. Historians may argue, but you know better. Most nights now are quiet. The air smells of lavender and soil. You grow tomatoes that win prizes no one remembers to award. There's a small rocking chair with your name carved underneath, badly by you, in a moment of wine-fueled pride. And beside it, a little stone marker. No name, just a small engraving of a rabbit, wearing a tiny Napoleonic hat. You tell your grandchildren stories, gentle ones, the kind with muddy boots and too much soup, and the time you outran an angry goose with a bayonet. But sometimes, when the wind is right, they ask, "Tell us about the rabbit army." And you do. You tell them about the day Napoleon fled a field overrun with bunnies, about the strange weeks when rabbits dug trenches, led patrols, and possibly saved the entire French left flank through strategic hopping. You leave out the part where you cried when Radish died. Or maybe you don't. Depends on the evening. They laugh, always. The kind of laugh that carries hope in it. But they listen, too, carefully. Like they sense there's more to the story than whiskers and war medals. And maybe they're right. Historians still debate whether Napoleon's rabbit incident was an embarrassing footnote or a forgotten miracle. But you lived it. You remember the soft drumbeat of paws across canvas, The night the rabbits returned to warn you. The single scribbled word, run. The way they vanished just before the worst. You remember a quiet kind of courage, the kind that doesn't make speeches or carry banners, just moves forward, one hop at a time. Some say it was all madness, hallucination, a fever dream stitched into memory by trauma and boredom. Let them. Because you also remember this. One spring morning, long after the war, you opened your door and found a small bundle on the porch, wrapped in moss, tied with a ribbon. Inside, a thimble, a single white daisy, and a map, hand-drawn, crudely but unmistakable. It pointed to a spot in the woods. You followed it and found nothing. Just a clearing, warm sun, the faintest sound of digging, and peace. That was enough. Now, as night falls and the stars prick the sky like old medals on a general's coat, you sit in your rocking chair and close your eyes, and in the hush between thoughts, you think you hear it again. The faint rustle, the soft patter of paws. Not coming for orders, not sounding an alarm, just visiting. You smile and say quietly, "Good to see you, Commander." Word counted down. And now, with the fire dimming low and the breeze settling into a soft hush, let your body sink deeper into wherever you're resting. You've wandered through time tonight, through muddy fields and absurd battle plans, through thickets of carrot-top diplomacy and harebrained military strategy. And somehow, out of all the great campaigns of history, this one, with its paws and whiskers, its trench-digging heroes and moonlit messengers, feels oddly right. Because sometimes, history isn't all empires and treaties and crown jewels. Sometimes it's a bundle of fluff with dirt on its nose and a plan in its heart. You might still hear the faint thump-thump of rabbit feet echoing in your memory as you drift, or feel the weight of a very tiny, very serious general hopping onto your chest with urgent news about troop positions and lettuce shortages. Let that bring a smile. Let your mind soften around the edges. There's nothing left to do now. The armies have marched, the battles are done, the rabbits are hopefully back in their burrows. And you, well, you've earned your rest. So let the silence widen. Let the air cool. Let every muscle in your body uncoil like a ribbon slowly unfurling. You're safe now. Wrapped in the absurd, gentle comfort of one of history's strangest little footnotes. A story with soft paws, twitchy noses, and the quiet, defiant courage to simply be. Good night, Commander. End of script. Sweet dreams.